Alright, so here's example 4 with the chain rule. We have f of t equals cosine cubed of 6t minus e to the negative 5t. Alright, so here we can put parentheses around the 6t first. We don't really need them, but it's good to have them. But anyway, we want to find f prime to t. So before we do that, let's go ahead and rewrite f of t so that it's easier to see what's going on here. So this is going to be cosine of 6 times t, and then that whole thing is being cubed, right? So this cosine cubed, remember that's just a quick way of writing this here. Then we still have minus e to the negative 5t. Okay, so let's make that a little more clear. That's a minus 5t up here. 5t, okay. So this is f of t. And now we want to find the derivative f prime of t. So this is one thing minus something else, right? So we could just differentiate term by term. So let's go ahead and do that. So f prime of t, let's just look at the first term first. Here, what's happening here? Start at the inside, work your way all the way out. So start at the t, what happens first? We multiply by 6. Then what? Then we then we take a cosine. Okay, so start at the t, first we multiply by 6, then we take a cosine, and then after that we cube it. So cube, this cubing here is the last thing that happens, so that's our big guy. That's our big guy for the first term. So the derivative of that, if we just have, let's come down here and say, if we just have t cubed, then the derivative is 3t squared, right? But remember the chain rule says do the derivative of the big guy and evaluate it at the little guy. So what's our little guy? Well, it's this in here. Okay, this is our little guy in here. So this is actually going to be 3 times, leave the inside alone, or in other words, evaluate at the little guy. So 3 times the little guy squared, and then times the derivative of the little guy. Alright? So that's what the chain rule says. Derivative of the big guy evaluated at the little guy times the derivative of the little guy. Okay? And notice we're actually going to have to do the chain rule again here for this first term. But anyway, what else is here? So minus the derivative with respect to t of e to the minus 5t. So, you know, we could start working on that, but let's just do it one term at a time. So we need to keep writing this, right? Otherwise, you know, we can't just ignore it. Otherwise, we'll get a wrong answer. But, you know, we just want to keep writing it, so let's just forget about it, but also make sure you keep writing it so it's still there. But anyway, what goes on next? So here, this is 3 times, let's say, cosine squared of 6t, like that. And then what happens here? So here we have to do chain rule again. Okay, so now we have a new big guy and a new little guy. So start at t, first thing we do is multiply by 6, and then we take a cosine. So cosine is the big guy, and multiplying by 6 is the little guy. Alright, so the chain rule says derivative of the big guy evaluated at the little guy. The big guy is cosine, so its derivative is minus sine, but we evaluate it at the little guy. Alright, and then we multiply by the derivative of the little guy. So in other words, the derivative of 6 times t. Alright, but the derivative of 6 times t is just 6, right? So let's just go ahead and write that now. So that's times 6. And that's the derivative for the first term. So then we have minus ddt of e to the negative 5t. Okay, so now let's go ahead and simplify the first term, and then we'll start working on the second term. So 3 cosine squared of 6t times negative sine 6t times 6. 3 negative and then 6. So that's going to be negative 18 cosine squared of 6t times sine of 6t. So that's our first term. Alright, now what happens here? ddt of e to the negative 5t, well, let's go ahead and come up here and think about, okay, if we have just ddt of e to the t, what's that? That's just e to the t, right? So, well, how's that useful to us? Well, here, what's the big guy, what's the little guy? Start at the t, first thing we do is multiply by negative 5, and then we do e raised to that. So the little guy is multiplied by negative 5, and the big guy is do e raised to that. Okay? So the derivative of the big guy is just e to the t, but chain rule says evaluate it at the little guy. So derivative of the big guy is e to the t, but we evaluate it at the little guy, negative 5t. So we're actually just going to have e to the negative 5t. All right, and then chain rule says multiply by the derivative of the little guy. All right, and the little guy is negative 5t, so its derivative is just negative 5. But before we write that down, I want to point out, let's say it again what happened here. So derivative of this here, okay, it's going to be derivative of the big guy evaluated the little guy, and the big guy is e, right? E raised to some stuff. And we know that the derivative of e to the t is just e to the t. Okay, so the derivative of the big guy is going to be e to the t, but chain rule says evaluate it at the little guy. Okay, so the derivative of the big guy evaluated at the little guy, and then multiply by the derivative of the little guy. All right, so that's what the chain rule says here. Probably a better way to remember that is say, if you want to take the derivative of e to a thing, then that's going to be e to that thing times the derivative of that thing. Okay, so that's probably the phrase you want to remember is the derivative of e to a thing is e to that thing times the derivative of that thing. All right, so that's what's going on here. So d dt of negative 5t is just negative 5. So let's go ahead and write that here. All right, and then we can start simplifying this here. So the first term just, pretty much stays as it is. Negative 18 cosine squared of 6 times t times sine of 6 times t. All right, and then minus e to the negative 5t times negative 5. That means plus 5e to the negative 5t. And that's our answer, for example, 4 here. That's our derivative. So if we have f of t equals cosine cubed of 6t minus e to the negative 5t, then f primed of t is going to be this big old mess here. All right. And if you take only one thing away from this video, it should be this here. The derivative of e to a thing is e to that thing times the derivative of that thing. Okay? So that's what's important to remember here. All right, and that's example 4.